How's it? Welcome back to the channel. Editing Ryan here. I am sitting here right now. I'm editing part 2 of the modding my dad's Landcruiser while he is on holiday video series. This is the final part. If you haven't watched part 1 yet, please go do so. It's rather vital for enjoying part 2. Also, just go watch it, please. If you just came from part 1, hi there, happy to see you here. So if you can't already tell from the description, in this video you'll be finding out whether or not castor correcting bushes on an 8 series Landcruiser are worth it. How difficult are they to install, how do we install them, etc, etc, etc. Also, I'll be finalizing a few other mods on the thing. So yeah, without any further ado, I hope you enjoyed the video. Cue the tape. Well, not the tape, it's all digital format. There weren't any tapes. It was all really on an SD card, so I don't know. Play.
Second step, grab a jack and use that to support the differential, because once you remove the radius arms, the differential is most likely going to want to tilt. It'll just tilt. So what you want to do is prevent that, because if it does, it's just going to be more difficult to get the radial arms back in. Here you sort of have to use your common sense. You need to predict to where the diff is going to tilt. So it's usually going to tilt towards the pinion, so you want to focus on just supporting the weight of the pinion so it doesn't tilt backwards. The likelihood of it tilting forwards is very, very low. And if you really want to, for good measures, you can grab some trestles and just support wherever you want to support more weight, just for safety's sakes. And I mean, yes, you can do this without lifting the vehicle or removing the front axle, but you got to remember the radius arms are actually what keeps the axle underneath the vehicle and keeps it from rolling forwards or backwards, and the vehicle nose planting into the tarmac, or at least that's how I understand it. Now if you look at these wheels, if you pull it backwards or move it forwards, it will tend to swivel to face the direction in which it is traveling. Those are castor wheels, and that is what castor does on the front wheels of a regular car as well. And if you lift basically any cruiser, because almost all of them use the same radius arm design, but we're focusing on the 80. If you lift an 80 series Landcruiser 2 inches or more, you basically lose that castor and it goes a bit winky wonky wobbly at highway speeds, which is not very fun. And if we venture down here and look at the pinion of the differential, if I can just adjust the, yep, that's about right. If you can, I don't know how well you can see that, but the pinion angle from the differential does not match the drive shaft. A harsh pinion angle like that will result in your universal joint and or your drive shaft wearing prematurely and maybe even failing under heavy load. And that harsh pinion angle in this case is a direct result of the suspension lift, and what the castor correcting bushings will do is also fix that pinion angle. But without any further ado, let me get cracking on getting those radial arms out. Note to you watching this, you need to remove both, because when you insert the bushings on the one side, you will need the other side and its bolts to align the bushings. I'll show you that later. Alrighty, there you go, the radius arms are out. I'm glad I didn't record that, because that was a painful job and may or may not have included using the warranty voided 2000 on my ratchet. The 4 front nuts were 22mm and they were torqued to oblivion, and the rear ones for some reason were 24mm, but they actually weren't too bad. And now comes the fun part, because I need to remove all 6 of those bushings. Yippity-doo-dah. Now online multiple times I have seen people set fire to their rubber bushings, and it looked like fun, so I've given them some tool in a can to use as an accelerant. So now apparently the move to remove these bushings is to drill them out with a hole saw and then get at the metal collars that actually are pressed into the cast metal. Obviously I don't have a press, so that's what I'm going to have to do. So you just make sure that you have a hole saw that will fit in between your collar, your inner and your outer collars, drill out the rubber, and then you attack that outer collar and use great force to remove it. fun. Yeah. Okay, so the cordless drill doesn't quite have enough juice for that. The power is out. Well then, I guess let me shift my focus to the one other job that I now have, which is getting the spotlights to work. That switch right there, which is responsible for making the spotlights work, has stopped working. So let me yank that out and see what is going on. This is very fiddly while holding a camera. I do not know why I decided to do it like this. Ow! But for these clips in general, it is smart to use a knife instead of a screwdriver, just because, for obvious reasons, a knife has a thinner. That's why it stopped working. It's not connected. A knife has a thinner, flatter edge, which stands less chance of damaging the cover or the dashboard. At some point, somebody clearly took their time retrofitting that little switchy with its pilot lights into the OEM cover, but sadly it has not held up, and it just simply does not work. So we're going to chuck that and see what we can do with this. Now, I always keep a bunch of switches on hand, and I really want to use this nice and shiny button, but sadly it is a momentary switch, so that's not going to work. I'm going to have to use a regular old on and off toggle switch. This is really overkill for that because it has a relay and it doesn't really need a beefy switch like this. This is a 20 amp switch, but it's what I have. It'll work, and it should work for very long. It would seem as though using a regular toggle switch had its benefits, because that little plate hides all of the holes and relative butchery that this poor plate has seen. I also took some Q-bond, you can see it there, took some Q-bond to permanently fasten because it was a little bit jiggly, but it's in there, it'll hold, it'll work. And after lots of fiddling and plenty of cussing, I also finally have terminals on the positive and negative wires there. Now I just need to connect the two, pop it back in, and this thing will have working spotlights again. It's on, it's insulated, pop it back in, and now it should work. Oops. I've forgotten something very important with regards to the radial arms. You need to chock your rear wheels too. Oops. Hello there. Hello there. Hi. Can I help you? What do you want? What do you want? Are you no? Give me that. Give me. Huh? Right. Hat. Where's my hat? Hat. Yes. Okay, so there are the radius arms. I've removed the bushings from one. Well, I've removed the bushings from both, but I've removed the outer collars from one. And that was definitely work. Lots of it. Seems as per usual, things got a bit hectic, I got a bit chaotic, I forgot to record because the work got very difficult. But to remove the inner collars, you will need a drill with a hole saw that will fit, and maybe a grinder depending on the depth of your hole saw. That's because the inner collars on the front bushings on the arms, no, the inner collars on the rear bushings on the arms protrude from the actual arm. So if your hole saw isn't deep enough, you might need to just cut the inner collar flush to the actual arm, and then you just do with the hole saw what you do with the hole saw, and eventually the inner collars will come out. Word to the wise, the rubber does smoke a whole lot and the fumes are very noxious, so if you've got asthma or you're just a hypochondriac like me, wear some breathing protection like a face mask or something. And cover up. I actually think I got like 3rd-degree burns on my ankles. Some are other burns, and they're also coated in a light dusting of molten rubber. Yes, it is very painful. I'm rather uncomfortable, but yeah, cover up because the molten rubber spatters and it is very hot. And it gets everywhere, like I ruined my shoes. And then here are the tools that I've been using to remove the outer collars. a 2-pound hammer. If you're strong enough, use a 4-pound, but I'm not very strong, so I'm using a small one. A maul, I believe that's what you call it, just a straight metal thing that's rather thick, so you can actually use all of the power from the hammer. I've got a wedging device, which in my case is a broken flat screwdriver, some vice grips, and it's smarter to use like a jigsaw or a sawzall or something, but somebody removed ours from here. It is gone, so I'm using just a regular hacksaw. If you want to make your life much easier, clamp the arm in a vise and then go to town on it. When you clamp the arm in the vise, clamp it as close to the bushing that you will be working on as possible, because the closer you are to the bushing, the less vibration there is, the more energy that you exert will actually be transferred into removing that outer collar. And here is all of the refuse. I already started cleaning up because that rubber, if you step on it, it gums up your shoes. But there is one of the outer collars, and there are the inner collars and bushings. As you can see, that rubber gets very, very sticky once it gets hot. So that absolutely sucked. It was more or less an hour and a half, 2 hours of just hammering and sawing and hammering and sawing and forcing, and finally the radius arms are ready to accept the new bushings. But the bushings have to be pressed in, but if I'm lucky I should manage with the vice and some cunning. It seems as though they will go in rather easily if I lube them up. These are 80 Shore bushings, I believe. They're not very hard. Definitely not as hard as the 90 Shores that I have for the Opal, so they should glide in. The offset ones are going to be tricky because I made a mistake and took the old bushings out of both. You're actually just supposed to do one at a time, and then you use the bushings and the bolts on the one that you haven't done yet to align these properly. Luckily, the instructions that came with these tell me that these two holes on the front parts of the radius arms need to be 1,850 millimeters apart. No, which one is it? 185 millimeters apart, and then they should work. One should be facing up, one should be facing down. That's it. But I'm going to start with the rear bushings. Gosh, my arm is getting tired. I'm going to start with the rear bushings. Need to lube them inside and out and see how that goes. Keep in mind when removing and installing bushings in the 80 series cruiser arms, one side of these holes has a tapered edge, the other one has a harsh edge. The tapered edge is the one you want to be working with when you're removing and installing new bushes. It will make your life much easier. Okay, it is tomorrow. I have waited for the sun to get to a point where I have some shade, and that has now happened. This morning I went over to an uncle who has a hydraulic press. I gave him a 6-pack of black labels and he helped me install the cost correcting bushes in the radial arm. And as you can see, all 6 of them are in. I really did not enjoy the process of installing those, mainly because for some reason those seem to actually be 90 Shore bushings instead of 80 like I assumed them to be. They're super duper hard and they were slightly difficult to work with. But they're in and life moves on. So let me wrestle them into place so I can actually get that thing mobile again and get the fun work finished. Now I've been told that the best way to install these is to start with the middle part, then that part, then behind. So you install it on the differential, starting with the middle bushing, and then once it's on the differential, you use the radial arm as a lever to sort of wrestle both the differential and the radial arm onto its final mounting and its final resting position. Right here, the bitch is in. If I can just focus. Tools that were used included a 2-pound hammer, a slightly large screwdriver, a crowbar, and obviously sockets and spanners, a 24 socket, 22 socket, 22 spanner, and a ratchet. Also did not use the jack, didn't use the trestle, but the trestle was there for safety because having the front axle actually sort of kind of detached from the vehicle and not knowing what I'll do next was pretty kind of very scary. So I had it propped up underneath, where's my finger? Propped up underneath the cross member, and then obviously I used the ratchet strap. If you ever plan on working on a solid axle vehicle, get ratchet straps. Different sizes, different lengths, just get ratchet straps. They are such a valuable tool when it comes to aligning and installing the axles on these things. So I looped the one end of the strap around the front axle, attached the other end to the cross member, and then just used that to pull the front axle to where I needed it to be, because it had shifted slightly forwards while it was sitting, and it did give me some grief with regards to getting that last bolt in. That took about 30 minutes and 40 something seconds, and it was challenging but not really difficult. It was actually quite satisfying, quite fun. Kind of like when I installed the rear axle on the blue thing, my blue thing, not this blue thing. It was manly. It's like, yeah, I did that. Because you're working with big stuff underneath 3 tons of Japanese metal, and you're using big tools, and it's actually quite a good time. I thoroughly enjoyed that. Right, after a short epilogue, the radius arms are in and torqued down. You need to torque all 6 bolts to, according to my Google research, 177 Newton meters. If you don't know which end to torque down, just torque down the end that has a washer on it. Don't just take my word, do your own research. Google the torque specs yourself. I may or may not be wrong. I still need to go in, clean the bolts, mark them, because obviously if you work on something like that, after torquing it, you need to take it for a test drive, obviously, when you're done. And then after the test drive, you need to do a bolt check, and just doing that little stripe that shows you where the bolt ended up will aid you greatly in doing the bolt check. Also, if you get really disciplined with it and you put the little stripe there, every time you torque a bolt down, you'll know for a fact whenever you haven't torqued a bolt yet, because it will not have a stripe there. So that's just a good thing to teach yourself to do. Anyways, I'm busy putting the spare wheel carrier on, but I'm not showing you that just yet. But here is a quick life hack. I've got one spot that has a bolt and washer that needs to go in a damn near impossible place, and I learned this trick on an old TV show that I watched as a kid. If you need to get a bolt and washer combination into a very tricky spot where you don't have a lot of space, take some super glue, some gel super glue or some Q-bond, and just stick them to each other. Put both of them on a bolt and stick them to each other. Be sure to move them around so that it doesn't stick to the bolt. But now you have a single unit that will be much less fiddly to get into a tough to get to spot. Morning! It is once again tomorrow, and I think this is shaping up to be a very long video, or this is the second of 2 videos. I don't know yet. But I worked a bit into the night, got up early and tied off all the loose ends. I've got all 6 of the bolts marked so I can do the bolt check once I've done the test drive. And if we come over here, let me just close it so you don't see it just yet. The spare wheel cover is on. Luckily I managed to find the little covers for it. It is fastened with sandwich plates and 8.8 high tensile hardware with lock nuts. I stole that from, if it will focus, I stole that from my dad's camping trailer, not like that needs it anyways. And if we open it up here, you will find the name that I have now bestowed upon this cruiser, because it is indeed very fat. Almost forgot, I also moved the switch over closer to the driver's side, and I put one of those little safety covers on it, because just having an exposed toggle switch looks and feels very lazy. So without any further ado, let me throw on the appropriate 80 series Landcruiser driver attire, if it'll go on, and take this thing for a test drive. Alright then, let's hop onto the highway and see how it feels at speed. This is 3rd gear. I am giving it all that it has got to offer. 90, 95, 100, 100, 105, 110. We are really moving now. Indicate just so I can get on the highway. And once we get to 120, I have the information that I require. Okay, that's 120, that's highway speed. And it's driving, I'm not going to say like it's unmodified, because it's still a bit winky wonky, because it's got some very old new suspension and the shocks are giving in, but it tracks, it goes straight, it needs a wheel alignment, but it does not feel like it wants to kill me. The other day I got death wobble with this thing at 130 and poo came out, it was not fun. And now I actually feel confident to drive this thing at speeds, which previously, boy, yeah, was not fun. But now she's solid, already much better around turns, and even at low speeds, much better. I was prepared to be disappointed by this, but I really am not. The car feels miles better, and it feels much more solid, better than it ever has. So, if you do lift your cruiser, I'm not going fast enough for the fast lane, if you do lift your 80 series Landcruiser, do the castor correction bushings, or the castor correcting plates. Some people prefer those. I did the bushings, I didn't do the plates, so I don't know anything about the plates, but do the castor correction, it will make the vehicle so much better. I am so happy with this. I can't wait for my dad to drive it. This is going to be so cool. Gosh. Also the pinion angle, I forgot to show you that earlier, but the pinion angle is dead straight now. It's like it should be. So that's one less worry to have with this thing. One less thing that's going to be more likely to break. So that's great as well. Anyhow, I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know what you enjoyed, what you want to see more of, what you want to see less of, and I will see you in the next one. Cheers!